Hello and welcome to episode 86 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR. As always, I am joined by the king himself, fellow co-founder Evan Silva. Evan, it is August, my friend, a couple short fortnights away from week one. What's going on?
What's going on? Today we're going to be talking about BUSTS, players that we think are going to fall well short, not just undershoot their ADP, but fall well short of their ADP. And this is always a very controversial topic, and people get very, lots and lots of vitriol is spewed over BUSTS. And I can't wait to make my predictions and hear yours.
I think one of your most popular and probably successful articles leading up to drafts for the last, 10 years has been the Shy Away 40 that you do. And it's been remarkably on point, guys to shy away from in drafts based on their ADP. So we're just going to give people a little bit of a teaser on it here. You can look for the full article later in August as it gets to peak draft season. Speaking of the draft kit, wanted to remind everyone it's just $35. Comes with a $25 coupon. Using any FFPC league. Includes Silva's top 150, Silva's tiers. We have rankings for every possible format. Tons of articles from Silva, myself, Goren, Thorne, Dink, Leone. Everyone you know and love. I try to convince the team to make it more expensive every day. One day I will win, so go ahead and check it out now on the site. Okay, I want to be clear that the term bust is, of course, relative, as Evan alluded to. A player can have a decent season and still be a bust if he was a first-round pick. When we say the word bust, we're talking about the opportunity cost of players being selected around him in fantasy drafts, right? Like, in other words, we'd hope that you think of player values as a market. X player could be really good pick in the 7th round, but if the market thinks that he's worth a 4th round pick, then he's a bad pick. So anyways, that's just a long way of saying that these guys are guys we definitely aren't taking this season at their current ADPs or really anywhere near their current ADPs. Let's start with one of your most controversial takes, Evan. Even people inside the Established Run family think you're crazy for this one. You could not be more out on DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins currently has an ADP of 19th overall. By the way, I'm using underdog ADP here. ADP of 19th overall has DeAndre Hopkins. You have had him as low as wide receiver 14 in the rankings. And when people see that, they just absolutely lose their mind. I know you talked about this before, but a quick recap on why you're completely out on DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, so, I think that we've learned, just from doing this really a long time, that there is an additional, a significant red flag whenever wide receivers change teams. They have to learn to play with a new quarterback. They have to learn a new offense. There's a lot of timing and rhythm that go into, having a successful rapport between a quarterback and a pass catcher. And I think that DeAndre Hopkins needs that because of the way he plays, because he's not necessarily, an elite separation receiver. He is a contestant catch and back shoulder receiver primarily, and he really developed that rapport with not only Deshaun Watson in Houston, but also like Tom Savage, who was a guy that was a terrible actual quarterback, but definitely was willing to rip it to DeAndre Hopkins. Now DeAndre Hopkins goes to a team with a lot more balance. Number 2 in rushing offense, DVOA, this past year. Not much practice time to be able to develop that rapport that I think he's going to need early on, certainly with Kyler Murray. I think that Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald are on the interior, are legitimate target competition. No matter what you think of Larry Fitzgerald at this point in his career, he's going to attract 5, 6, 7 targets a game. Christian Kirk, I think, is absolutely an ascending player. Kenyon Drake is a player that I think has a chance at 60 catches this year. DeAndre Hopkins averaged over the past 5 years 166 targets per season in Houston. And I think that on a more balanced team, again, with an elite, I think we could say an elite running game, based on what they did in Cliff Kingsbury's first year, I think it's much likelier that DeAndre Hopkins finishes in the 130 to 140 target range. That will be a big hit. And really, if you look historically at the Kingsbury / Mike Leach style of offense, they don't envision offensive balance as run to pass 50-50 ratio.
Mm-hmm.
They envision offensive balance as distributing the ball equally or relatively equally among your playmakers. Obviously, the better playmakers are going to get the ball a little bit more, and the weaker playmakers are going to get the ball a little bit less. But I don't think that he's jumping into a situation where they're going to be going all out to get DeAndre Hopkins the rock down after down after down like they were so often in Houston. And I think that people are almost assuming that he's going to be able to jump right in, that Kyler Murray's going to take his passing game to the next level and all this. There's a lot of assumption, a lot of hope-based projections going into DeAndre Hopkins' ADP right now. And I'm going to stay way, way, way below it. I think that valuing him as a fringe wide receiver 1, 2 is fair. That's where we have him right now, as opposed to a top 5 receiver, which is where he is in ADP.
Yeah, and this is going to be a huge gap, and obviously if you're using the rankings, you're never, ever going to get DeAndre Hopkins. I actually don't want DeAndre Hopkins either. I agree with Evan. I wouldn't have him quite as low as Evan does, but I also don't want DeAndre Hopkins. One point that I would make too is people assume that the quote-unquote air raid, Cliff Kingsbury's offense, means Kyler Murray's going to throw the ball 50 times a game. That's not what it means. In fact, I think they're going to be, as Evans alluded to, pretty balanced and with their run game. They played their best football last season when they got the run game going schematically. So yeah, even if DeAndre Hopkins does get 24% of the targets, which I think is fair, it's not going to be as much volume, I think, as maybe some people are expecting in general. So we agree with that one. We're going to have some here that we disagree on. Maybe we disagree on this one, Evan. This is one that I submitted, and this one pains me, man. It really does. If you have followed me for the last, 4 years, you know that nobody has been more affectionate towards Chris Godwin. Shout out to Penn State. I have t-shirts of this guy that fans have sent me with Chris Godwin on his knees, praising the Lord. I have memes of him all stacked up on my computer, as God himself. But man, at an ADP of 21.2, I think people often underrate how important game environment is when it comes to player projections. Who's been in the top 2 in ADOT the last 2 seasons? The Bucks, average depth of target. Who's been in the top 7 in passing rate the last 2 years? Yeah, the Bucks. Who leads the NFL in pick sixes the last 2 years? Literally, which is the best thing that can happen to a wide receiver? The Bucks. So all these things combine to create these exact perfect game environments. Now enter Tom Brady, who's the exact opposite of all those things. Will not turn the ball over, will not be among the league leaders in ADOT, will not let the game get loose, will not let the Bucks get into these 28-3 deficits or 37-31 back and forth games. And so it's Mike Evans is there, and they added more red zone competition in Rob Gronkowski, we talked about in the last podcast. So to me, 21.2 is just way too rich for Chris Godwin. I know it's shocking for people to hear that. I kind of think of it like DFS, when you're on a guy when nobody's on him 1 week, and then his salary goes up, the situation is worse, and everybody's on him the next week. That's a sick fish type of play. So I hate to use the word sick fish around Chris Godwin. I kind of hope that he proves me wrong, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be drafting him at all if his ADP stays around 20, 21, 22. Evan, I know this is kind of a hot take. Tell me I'm not crazy.
You're not. We were getting him in every single draft last year, virtually. He was one of our highest owned players by far. And this year I don't think I've taken him once, maybe once out of, 20, 25 drafts or something like that. He goes right around that 2-3 turn, and that's one of the dead spots, I think, this year in drafts. And he's part of it. I feel like you're almost forcing it with Chris Godwin. I do have him as the wide receiver 5. I do think he's going to have a really good year. Yeah, I think I'm with you. He's not someone that I'm super excited to draft this season.
What about people who say Chris Godwin is just going to be the Edelman for Tom Brady? Do you see any comparison there?
Yeah, I think that he's going to run the highest percentage routes in the receiver core, and I think that theoretically that best suits the game of Tom Brady right now. Yeah, he's just not someone that I've been excited to draft because there's just no value there. We sucked all the value out of Chris Godwin. Right.
And there's a big ADP gap now between Godwin and Mike Evans. And we were, one of the good bits we had last year was who's the Bucs' number 1 receiver, Evans or Godwin. And, I jokingly said it wasn't even close. I do think that it's close. Like the ADP gap between Godwin and Mike Evans should not be as wide as it is, even though I understand Chris Godwin runs the routes that Tom Brady likes to throw to the most at this point in his career. All right, let's get to another one of yours. And this one we agree on too. I mean, God, Leonard Fournette, his ADP is 37.8, almost solely betting on just raw touch volume. That's something Kareem's talked a lot about, where when you're just betting solely on touch volume at the running back position and no other really positive factors, you're asking for trouble. I think a lot of people are asking for trouble with Leonard Fournette. Go ahead on him.
He's not good, and his team is not good. So, this is a tough one to justify with his third round ADP. Worst team in the league, I think by a full game at DraftKings Sportsbook. Jaguars have a win total of 4.5. They're going to be playing from behind constantly. People love to point out that he had 100 targets and 76 catches last year. He ain't getting that this year. He averaged 5.2 yards per target. Absolutely pathetic. They brought in Chris Thompson, who I know, he's old, he gets injured. Jay Gruden's going to play Chris Thompson. Like, Jay Gruden knows Chris Thompson from DC. I mean, he's gonna be in the lineup, and taking away those catches. I think that Raquel Armstead definitely can make a run at Leonard Fournette's early down touches. I think Leonard Fournette could get cut or traded before the season. The Jaguars tried to trade him around the draft, found no takers. We're probably a little bit surprised, and probably would be willing to take like a 7th round conditional pick for him. At this point, they did not exercise his option for 2021. He's been injured frequently. People all of a sudden, they wouldn't draft him last year because he always gets injured. Now, but then he has 1 year where he, stays mostly healthy, and now people want to draft him. Doesn't make sense to me. Maybe the lowest floor RB2 pick of anyone this year, to where he could actually spend several weeks out of the league. Why do people think he's good? Is it because they're playing Madden and he's good in Madden? Because it's certainly not based on his production on the field. I mean, they're certainly not watching him play and being like, oh, that guy's good. Or they're certainly not looking at even so much at his box scores. Is it because they're playing Madden and he's good in Madden? Is he good in Madden? I don't play Madden.
I think it has something to do with draft capital. I mean, he was a number 4 overall pick in the draft, that people cling to draft capital like crazy, and so they assume that a guy who went 4th overall at the running back position has to be good. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. If you read enough Jaguars beat writers, like, they are not convinced he's going to be on the roster come week 1. And for a guy like that to be going 37th overall is just crazy. And also, the only other thing I'd add that you didn't mention, I mean, I think not only will Chris Thompson take some of those short area looks, they could use Laviska Shenault in that area too, and kind of just like swing the ball out to him, and he'd be more productive than Leonard Fournette in that role as well. Okay. I'm going to submit Todd Gurley as a bust. He's going 30th overall in ADP right now. And again, as I mentioned with Leonard Fournette, I really want to be careful about getting high on the running back just for simple touches. I thought the run scheme they ran last year, and maybe part of this was due to offensive line injuries, their running game just looked broken last year. Like, Devontae Freeman was so inefficient. So was Brian Hill in spots where he got to take over. And this version of Todd Gurley, is he going to make that big of a difference for this run scheme? I mean, even Dirk Cutter admitted that the Falcons don't know how much they can ride Todd Gurley. Like, just because the Falcons signed Todd Gurley, I mean, these guys have made some donkey moves. I don't think that this necessarily means they assume he's healthy. So 30th overall, and this is where you start to get into modified 0RB and 0RB stuff. Like, I want the 3rd and 4th round wide receivers so much more than I want the 3rd and 4th round running backs like Gurley and Fournette. So I'm passing on Fournette. I'm certainly passing on Todd Gurley as well. I'm not sure where you have Todd Gurley in top 150 right now or not, or where you're at versus market. But what do you think?
No, he's only a little bit below ADP in terms of his just positional rank, but in his overall top 150, where he is in the overall top 150, we're way below consensus on him. And that's because of the running back thirst. And that is one of the reasons why I think this year, usually I'm a big promoter of using the tiers to draft. I think that's the best way to draft. But this year, I think that using the linear top 150 might actually be more beneficial, because we do have the running backs. The running backs that you actually want are jammed up high, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's sort of like a tier of, a couple of elite tight ends and a couple of big time, wide receiver ones. And then And then you move on to, and then we kind of stay with, we mix in a little bit of James Conner and but we stay with a big chunk of great receiver plays, and then we move back into the running backs eventually. But we make sure, essentially, if you're using the top 150 linear rankings, you're going to get a bell cow RB. You're going to get a ton of value at with an elite tight end or one or two elite wide receiver ones, and then you can go back into, and some people would call this RB anchor or modified zero RB, and you take several rounds off from drafting running backs. You can come back and put together stockpile 4 or 5 running backs that can skate you through the first few weeks to use as your RB2. You have that RB1 locked in, and you're elite at all your other positions.
Yeah. And this is going to be the same story. We're going to talk again about a running back, a mid-round running back here who we're definitely out on. And then we'll get into, I think, some more interesting guys. But quickly on Le'Veon Bell, who we have, talked a bunch about. Le'Veon Bell, 45.6 ADP. He's going to show up on your shy away list for sure. I mean, it's pretty easy, I think, to summarize the problems with Le'Veon Bell, the schedule, addition of Frank Gore, Adam Gase is a donkey. Is there anything more to say on being out on Le'Veon Bell?
I would just say that we were already pretty much out on him. Well, signing Frank Gore and drafting LaMichael Perine, or Pirine, they used a 4th-round pick on LaMichael Pirine, and they signed Frank Gore, who always plays more than anyone anticipates because coaches love him, and certainly Adam Gase loves him. Those were huge, huge red flags. Add to that the fact that the game script looks even worse for the Jets after they traded Jamal Adams and CJ Mosley opted out. I mean, their defense now could be really – their defense was okay last year. Mm-hmm. Their defense could be really, really bad. This is another situation where I'm not sure that Le'Veon Bell finishes the season on the Jets roster. Earlier in the offseason, I was sort of willing to take Le'Veon Bell to just put the touches on my roster. Mm-hmm. But I regret that, and I'm not taking him anymore.
Yeah.
And that O-line is freaking brutal. I think Brandon pointed out that they might have 5 new starters now.
Right. Oh, they do have 5 new starters. They've upgraded talent, but man, I mean, they're gonna have to get it together in a hurry. And Brandon was obviously skeptical about that. Let's get into some guys maybe we haven't talked about very much. Here's one that we haven't talked about that is gonna be on my list of guys I'm not taking. That's Keenan Allen, 58.3 ADP. Keenan Allen annually has one of the NFL's lowest average depths of targets. And that's fine, when you're getting 9, 10, 12 targets a game, the volume and the catch rate can be there. But when you're only getting 7 targets, well, now we have a problem, right? Because you're going to end up with a lot of 5 for 43 lines and stuff like that. And with Phillip Rivers gone and Tyrod Taylor in with one of the NFL's most talented defenses, with Mike Williams and Austin Eckler and Hunter Henry all taking target shares, I don't see Keenan Allen getting anywhere near the volume he needs to pair with his route tree and actually find a big ceiling. So I think 58.3 is really high for Keenan Allen. There's so many wide receivers in this range that I like more. I don't know. Can you get DK Metcalf here? Can you get Tyler Lockett here? You can certainly get Will Fuller here. People like Marquise Brown. I don't like him as much, but guys like that, I think you're going to find a way bigger ceiling on than Keenan Allen. So I am out on Keenan. I hope he doesn't listen to this, though, because I'm pretty sure he'll come out and crack me on Twitter. He takes stuff very personally on Twitter, and so I'm a little bit worried about that, but I'm out on Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I don't like to speak ill of Keenan Allen because I love his game, and I like that he said that, I'm better than all those receivers.
Yeah.
That's how he should think. He should take every day with a chip on his shoulder. He was underdrafted coming out of college. I think he definitely doesn't get the respect that he deserves. And his job on every play is to go fight for the football against other humans. So he should absolutely be competitive in everything that he does, and I respect him for that. He should definitely think he's the best receiver in the league every time that he goes and practices or goes and plays a game. I mean, even if he isn't, he should have that mindset, no question. And I take nothing away from him for that, but I am, like you, out on him and most of the Chargers this year.
Yeah. Here's one that was on your list who I think people are maybe a little bit surprised about, because when a player is ascending and he's young and he's talented, people think we're just automatically going to be on him because we prefer to be on young ascending guys. But you are out on Courtland Sutton, Broncos wide receiver. Talk to people about that.
Yeah, so we were big on Cortland Sutton last year. We were way above consensus on him, and he was a really nice hit for us. This year, there's major quarterback uncertainty. I have very low confidence either way, whether Drew Lockett is bad or good. I just don't know. You know, he went 4-1 in his starts last year, but really only was exceptional in the one game against Houston, which was just an absolute, disaster game for Houston. The Broncos brought in a new OC, a new quarterbacks coach. They brought in a new number 2 and number 3 receivers who they used a lot of draft capital on, and KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy. Noah Fant is entering his second year. I think that at the end of the day, they're going to remain a balanced to run first team after signing Melvin Gordon and bringing back Phillip Lindsay and, Vic Fangio. He's the head coach, and most teams build their team in the likeness of their head coach, and he's a defensive coach. So I still really like Cortland Sutton. But I think that he's going to have a down year, and then we try to buy him in 2021. That's sort of how I'm playing it with Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, and I think one thing about target shares in Denver, Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman did not project for many target shares. They didn't play that well in the past game, but Melvin Gordon does. And so you're taking even more targets away. Not only did they add Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler and Noah Fant in year 2, I think is going to take a reasonable leap, but also you add Melvin Gordon, who I think is going to get plenty of checkdowns as well, and you're starting to lose targets for Cortland Sutton in a hurry. Okay, this one, we haven't talked about this guy at all. I just don't see it with Darius Geist at 78th overall. And maybe I'll see it more if Adrian Peterson ends up getting cut, which I think is possible. But they have Adrian Peterson right now. They have Antonio Gibson getting running back reps. They have Bryce Love. They have Peyton Barber. They have J.D. McKissic. And I get that Darius Geist is by far and away, no doubt, more talented than all those guys combined. Dude's played 5 games since getting drafted in 2018, ACL tear, meniscus, MCL sprain. He's playing behind Brandon Thorne's 30th ranked offensive line. Only the Bengals and the Dolphins have a worse offensive line, according to Brandon Thorne. And, this organization and team is just such a train wreck. I just don't understand how you could take Darius Geist at 78th overall and say it's because of anything except for his talent. And I get that people want to bet on talent, but the situation just seems so awful to me. So maybe I'm missing something here on Darius Geist. I don't think we've even spoken a word about him this year. I'm curious what your take is.
I actually think I have him ranked right around his ADP. Let me look at it real quick. Darius Geist, where'd you say he was, like 78?
Yeah, he's 78th on Underdog. He's going, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. All right. I know I have him RB 31, but I don't know. Either way, I haven't been getting him at all. But I did want to keep him sort of in a striking distance range in our rankings, because if Adrian Peterson gets hurt, then his ADP is going to absolutely skyrocket.
Well, he could get cut too.
Yeah, hurt or cut, right? Yeah. So I don't know. He's a tough one because he's talented. That they're going to want to run the ball in Washington. Their offense, the left side of their offensive line in particular, it just looks absolutely terrible. But I don't know. The talent is there. He's tantalizing, but man, there's a lot of. He really has a very low floor.
Yeah. Really low. Okay. Last one for you is David Johnson, and he's another one of these mid-round running backs. It's interesting, David Johnson obviously looked awful last year, and there's that one clip of him. It looks like he's like walking with like a cane or something as he tries to get to the edge. I would hope he'd be fresher and more explosive this year. They gave up a ton to bring him to Houston, which makes you think that the usage is going to be there. Talk to me about why you're out on David Johnson.
My concern is that they're going to just throw him into the Carlos Hyde role last year, which, had its moments last year. But Carlos Hyde is a much better inside runner than David Johnson. That's the weakness of David Johnson's game, is inside running. He really should be used as a perimeter space back, almost as a wide receiver. That's how they were – they dabbled with using him that way in Arizona in the first 6 weeks last year, and he definitely didn't embarrass himself. He made a few spectacular plays. And then, he got hurt and he tried to come back, and it was just a total disaster. But, they still have Duke Johnson there. They did pay a 3rd-round pick for him. I think that Duke Johnson is just a better fit for their offense than is David Johnson. And if they do try to stick him in that Carlos Hyde role where his primary job is interior running, he's gonna fail, and that's gonna lead to more time for Duke Johnson, who does have that full year of experience in the offense. It didn't go as well as we might have hoped in year 1, but I think that Duke Johnson just is a better bet at their respective ADPs. David Johnson's ADP keeps rising. I mean, every time that I'm doing a draft, he's going earlier and earlier. I've seen him. He went at 2.11 in last night to the guy who took Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 101 in the Pros versus Joe's draft. I've seen him go 3rd, 4th round pretty consistently. You can consistently get Duke Johnson 12th, 13th, 14th round. So, yeah, that's definitely where my bets are going to lie, with Duke Johnson as opposed to David Johnson at their respective ADPs, and it's not particularly close.
My biggest disagreement here is that I have punted off so much money assuming that coaches are going to use Duke Johnson. And maybe there's something we don't know about Duke Johnson that makes coaches not want to play him, because they gave him a 3rd-round pick for him and then barely used him. I mean, that was ridiculous. So I kind of think that there's something we're missing.
Well, I mean, Bill O'Brien just fell in love with Carlos Hyde. Just fell in love with them. But I mean, who are those coaches that have made those decisions?
Yeah, Hugh Jackson.
Hugh Jackson and Bill O'Brien. Of course, Bill O'Brien is still the coach of Duke Johnson, unfortunately.
Shout out to Hugh Jackson again for doing the cameo for us. That was awesome. Okay, last one we're going to talk about here. Darius Slayton. I don't understand this one. Darius Slayton has an ADP of 94.9. Meanwhile, Golden Tate has an ADP of 134. Sterling Shepard, who I actually like best, has an ADP of 108.4. I think what people are doing with Darius Slayton is they're extrapolating his stats from last year without bringing in the context of Evan Ingram hurt, Sterling Shepard missing time, Golden Tate missing time. And really, Darius Slayton only had 2 really big games. He went off on the Jets for 121 yards on 10 catches and 2 touchdowns. Then he went off on the Eagles, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns on 5 catches. 2 of the biggest pass funnels, 2 of the worst secondaries in the league last year. So I think you need a lot more context when you're evaluating Darius Slayton's rookie year. And that doesn't take anything away from the fact that I think he's a talented player, and I think Daniel Jones is going to breed fantasy upside. But like people are acting like Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram are gone or hurt again when they're taking Darius Slayton at 94.9. I would much rather take Sterling Shepard there or wait a couple rounds and take Golden Tate. What do you think about what's going on with the Giants?
Well, I have Golden Tate. First of all, I have Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton all ranked right next to each other. That's my hedge, I guess. But I think that it's probably the best way to do it because it really is kind of throwing darts at, who's really going to outscore who. They're all sort of in the same boat. I have Golden Tate first, though, and he has the lowest ADP. I drafted him last night in the Pros versus Joes as my wide receiver 7. I love that. I mean, this guy could easily catch 85 balls. Mm-hmm. I think that Darius Slayton's ceiling is probably around 60 catches, but he's got the big playability. And then Sterling Shepard, his concussion history is pretty alarming. But he's a savvy veteran, and when he's out there, he's going to be productive more often than not. Yeah. But I think that with Darius Slayton, people are just going for the explosiveness, the sort of shiny new toy. They don't see Golden Tate as sexy. When Golden Tate starts going in like the 13th round, that to me is sexy for a guy who has like 85 to 90 catch upside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really weird to me, the Darius Slayton ADP. And like I said at the beginning of this, the market is going to react, and I would expect eventually maybe Darius Slayton goes 3rd out of them. But right now, for him to be going 1st out of these 3 is just wild to me. Anyways, Evan's Shy Away article will be up much closer to the season once he has his final thoughts on who he is going to be shying away from in full. There'll be some of these guys on there, I'm sure, and there'll be a whole bunch more as he gets up to 30 or 40 guys he's shying away from. That'll be in the draft kit later. So look for that. Okay, that's going to do it for this BUSTS episode of the podcast. We'll be back next time with one of the best friends of the show, Pat Thorman, to talk snaps and pace and some ranking stuff. So for producer Luke, for Evan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.